Hello everyone, Enoch Burke was back before the High Court in Dublin yesterday in front of Justice Brian Cregan. Now the case took around an hour and Burke was led in manacles from Mountjoy prison where he's been held in contempt of court according to the High Court judge. Now he went on to say that Burke had a malign presence and he said he had been stalking teachers and pupils at Wilson's Hospital School. Now Burke has already served well in excess of 500 days in prison, and this is his fourth occasion, I believe, that he's back in Mountjoy prison. And during the week we saw the reports from the Irish Penal Reform Trust in terms of the drastic overcrowding in Irish prisons, where many prisoners are sleeping on mattresses and many are being released because there's no space to keep them in our archaic Dickensian prison conditions in Ireland. But of course there's space for Enoch Burke. Now Burke also claimed that he has taken a case to the Supreme Court on the basis of his dismissal from Wilson's Hospital School. Now currently that's before an Education Board of Appeal, and this is getting reconstituted and is due to sit in Athlone in the coming weeks. Now, of course, on foot of this appeal, he is taken to the Supreme Court. It is in relation to the High Court of Appeal's two judgments that came to different conclusions, interestingly enough, isn't it? Back in March 2023, the High Court judge claimed there was nothing to do with his views, and in July of 2025, they stated that his views and beliefs were part of what has taken place in terms of his refusal to use the they-them pronouns, of course, and pushing this transgender ideology. Now, what's interesting with this is that also the Attorney General is now being looked at taking a criminal case of contempt of court against his family members. Where does this end? Where does this circus end? Going on for nearly 3 years at this stage, and the circus just keeps continuing. I spoke about this a number of years ago and even months ago about the fact that you need to have a proper, rational, balanced, grown-up debate about main issues that are being taking place in relation to the Burke case, and also in relation to what's happening in wider society. And he also said he would not purge his contempt, and he said he didn't plan to purge it. And the judge also said that a protest outside the gate he wouldn't have been jailed. So the fact that he did it in the school, it's because he has trespassed according to the High Court judge and the order that was served on Enoch Burke. Now, of course, we've seen as I said, the transgender ideology, the use of pronouns and all this sort of stuff in society, which I believe is a massive distraction from the basic issues in Irish society. But of course, it suits the establishment to tie this case up in knots rather than dealing with the underlying issues and addressing them properly. And it's interesting when they mentioned the purging of contempt, because I recollect back in 2015 when there was 5 water charge protesters jailed for a number of months, and that was overturned because the committal warrant wasn't issued correctly. And of course there was massive protests, up to about 5,000 or 6,000 people hit the streets, and they marched up to Mountjoy prison in relation to those protesters, because they were supposed to keep an exclusion zone from the contractors GMC Sierra, of course owned by Dennis O'Brien. We all know about Dennis O'Brien, his connections to the political class in Irish society, Michael Lowry. And of course he was represented by the current Minister for Justice / Migration, Jim O'Callaghan, senior counsel, barrister, representing big business interests, and now he's doing the bidding for them when he's pushing through the EU migration and asylum pact despite his tough talking on immigration. And of course we've seen massive civil disobedience take place in relation to the water demonstrations. So there is a context for contempt not being purged, and what it is de facto is perhaps a life sentence, some people have been saying, which is absolutely outrageous that it's come to this. But it demonstrates how nonsense has taken over the institutions of the state to pursue their lunacy agenda through globalisation. Of course, it would be more apt to link what's happening in terms of the ideology, to what's taking place in terms of mass immigration, in terms of the globalisation agenda, and who benefits from this agenda on the wider scale. And while at the same time it's dividing people in society, putting people into two different camps, it suits those at the very top of society to drive this agenda through, rather than dealing with the underlying issues. And I know the Burkes themselves have their own approach to this, and perhaps they haven't elaborated the argument in terms of the globalisation argument taking place in society that's tied into these ideologies that are being pushed through the political establishment and of course the government organisations. I won't call them inverted commas non-government organisations, because they're all funded through the public purse. And really what's more revealing with this is more so around the massive division, as I've said, that's taking place right across our society in relation to this. But it is outrageous, and the bottom line is that if it starts here, where is it going to end? You have your basic right of religious freedom to practice your religious beliefs, in terms of the fact that Ireland being a Christian country, and of course which the political establishment are trying to erode any knowledge of, or allegiance essentially to any faith or any knowledge of our histories and traditions and so forth as well. That's all being eroded by the drive towards globalisation, where you have no attachment to anything. They're doing the same in terms of the context of the flag. They're doing the same in context of what's taking place in society through the mass immigration agenda. All they're looking for is cogs in the wheel to benefit those at the very top of society, the international financial capitalists, private equity firms, the billionaires, the big tech bosses, and the big corporations driving this globalist agenda. So a big part of it, and of course there's a bigger part to play in terms of the attack on basic freedoms in our society, which can't go unnoticed, unremarked by anybody, because if it starts here, where is it going to end? And as I said, there's context previously in relation to the purging of contempt. So thanks so much for the support on my videos, really appreciate them. Please share them, please subscribe, and thanks so much for people who support me through buying me a coffee also. So from Dublin today, Slán go fóill, take care, bye bye.